Rick Burke, I'm the executive director of SCELC, which is a consortium in California, but with libraries scattered all over the place. And what we're going to talk about this morning is don't be an invisible library. And I'll explain very briefly some background as to why we wanted to do this. This came out of a conversation that Franny Lee and I had, and I'll introduce Franny in a minute, about how can we get our libraries in front of our users more effectively and make them recognize the value of what the library is doing. And I'll tell you a little story to illustrate why this is a problem. I sort of randomly met a professor, a very high-level physicist at Caltech. Caltech is one of the member institutions of SCELC. And this man was brilliant. It was very clear. He was hanging out in a coffee house in Pasadena and just happened to be introduced to him. And we were talking about Caltech and his research and all that, and he asked what I did, and I said, well, I run a library consortium, and I explained what a library consortium is. And then I said, so do you use your library at Caltech? And he says, oh no, don't need the library anymore. I used to in the old days. I'd go and look at, back journals, but now I don't need to do that because it's all online. And I said, well, do you realize that it's the library that's paying for all that, and the reason it's online is because the library is providing it? And he just kind of gave me a blank look. And I thought, well, even at Caltech, the library hasn't, and they're very engaged with their faculty, but it shows you how difficult it is to truly engage with your faculty at a level where they all understand the role of the library. I mean, we're all used, we've been talking till we're blue in the face about electronic resources for years here, and you would think that we sort of assume that everybody else understands that that's the case, but it isn't. So that led me to SIPX, which is what Franny will be talking about. But first, let me mention that there's an opposite example of Caltech, and that's what Glenn Johnson-Grau, who's the head of collection development at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, one of our most active members, and he'll be talking about how they put their library very much in front of their users and how successful they are at that. And then I met Franny a year ago after Charleston, not at Charleston, kind of in a security line at the airport, but anyway, but not really there either. But I discovered what SIPX was, and SIPX, a light bulb went off in my head because it's a tool that would really help libraries a lot in terms of taking your resources and getting it in front of the end user, but letting the end user know, hey, the reason you're able to use this is because the library paid for it, and the library is providing this as a service. And then third is, and Franny, by the way, is the VP of Business Development at SIPX. And this is in the order in which they'll be speaking. So it's Glenn Johnson-Grau, Franny Lee, and then Matt Goldner is the head of product, is a product and technology advocate at OCLC. And in the context of SCELC, OCLC is an important partner because they help us engage our libraries at the group level. We have a couple of projects that we do with OCLC, among which is a patron-initiated borrowing network called Camino that uses OCLC Navigator software. And we also have a digital library project that uses Content DM software where we've purchased a group license that we resell at an incredibly cheap price to our libraries so they can start building digital collections. So OCLC also plays an important role in terms of providing services that then become valuable to the end user, and the end user starts to realize, gee, my library is really not invisible. So without further ado, I'm going to let them take over and speak, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Johnson-Grau. I'm the head of collection development at Loyola Marymount, and you're going to have to forgive me because I came down with a cold on the flight coming here, and that was not intended. So to anyone on the Delta flight from Los Angeles, I apologize for... I was that guy in row 37 coughing and sneezing. So let's see, how do I get these to advance? Excellent, thank you. I'm a collections person, but I'm going to primarily be talking about other things that the library's done. We've been, I think, very successful at making our library prominent on our campus and in other organizations. We're a mid-size academic institution. We're about 6,200 FTE undergrads and about 2,200 graduate students. Located in West Los Angeles. We're very lucky. We did build a new library and opened it in 2009. So if you want to not be invisible, that's one way to help yourself in that cause. But we did some things specifically trying to leverage our new library to take advantage of this new prominence on our campus. Partnership, I think you're going to hear this a lot by all the presenters. We realize that's kind of our theme for today, is working on building relationships with our partners. On our campus, we spend a lot of time working to develop relationships with our faculty and our administration and groups on campus. Whereas the mindset of partnership is the beginning point, we found that there's something that we can do that is kind of a peg on which we can hang programs, which is exhibits. We've done a number of things related to exhibits of all different kinds, and I'll give you some examples of that. And they become kind of the focus around which we are able to do a lot of our programming. So here's an example. We did this exhibit earlier this year. At the beginning of the year, it was ALA traveling exhibit on celebrating the 400th anniversary of the King James version of the Bible. And while that's not a natural connection for a Catholic institution to be showing the first prominent Protestant Bible, we knew that we could have partnerships on our campus that would work with us on this topic. And it was quite successful. So we involved our Theological Studies Department, English Department, African American Studies, campus ministry, lots of different programs on our campus. When we went to them and said, we're bringing this exhibit, do you want to do something with us? They were really excited about it. One of the nice connections that developed out of this was the director of our honors program, who we had a very strong relationship with related to library resources and honors students, came to us and said that he wanted to see some kind of connection between the African American community, the African American experience, and the King James Bible. And that led to one of the programs that was really exciting and was very well attended and was kind of considered a high point of the whole exhibit, where he introduced us to the director of the gospel choir at our campus, who then did a performance from her church, which was a large church with a big gospel group. They came and did a presentation and performance, so they would perform songs and then kind of explicate how the language of the King James Bible found its way into gospel music. So that would not seem to be, this is an event that was not held in the library. It would not, from outward appearance, have anything to do with the library, but it would not have happened if we wouldn't have brought the exhibit to our campus to get the whole thing started. One of the things that we have found is that partnerships beget other partnerships. So when we go looking for a partnership now related to an exhibit, like an exhibit we're trying to get on related to the Dust Bowl, we have people coming to us and saying, this is a totally different group of people, different academic departments, so it's not the same group of people, but they're excited because they knew it was a success, and they can realize that they can hang their programming and their events related to it on a different type of exhibit. So we really work on trying to get the word out on how these successful partnerships will allow us to do additional stuff. Okay, so we really very consciously tried to change the perception of what the library is and how the library fits in on a campus by focusing on things that we could do that were non-traditional library services. Again, largely related to the fact that we had this new building that we could kind of bring attention to ourselves for. So we want to build on the culture of collaboration that's very much a part of librarianship. That's our base. Librarians and libraries have a kind of warm and fuzzy relationship. People have good memories of us. People feel strongly about us. But until we actually turn that into something, it's just nostalgia. So we work very hard on trying to build upon that to change the idea of what the library is from the collections and the building to larger intellectual engagement in the campus. We also try very hard to work with our student groups related to things that they want to do. Both for faculty and students, there's this idea of the library as a third place. The sociologist, Burke, I can't remember his first name, talks about third place as a place where events can happen outside of the traditional, Ray Oldenburg, outside the traditional boundaries of the kind of the workplace and the home place. And when we were building our building, we were thinking a lot about how to turn that into the library into a third place on campus, both for our faculty and for our students. Students need places to be able to do things. So we want to make sure that we are engaging with our student groups who can, they don't have a campus home, so they can be able to come and place things in the library. So the picture on your left is a picture of our students doing a tour, a senior tour of the campus, where they get to see hidden places on the campus, and they really like to be able to see these places that were kind of off the map, including our stacks in the basement of the library. Who'd have thought? But they like that. We try and use social media to be able to engage with our students, not just as a way to present our programs, not just pushing out information, but really trying to engage them in conversation in the place where they're actually doing a lot of their own types of communication. So it's very important for us to be able to know what our campus, the kind of climate of our campus. So we work very hard at working on engagement with the kind of the institutional mission, working on the academic planning and strategic planning. We strongly encourage our librarians to be involved in campus governance. We have a role on the Faculty Senate. We're represented on the Faculty Senate, so we spend time being on the Senate and being on Senate and academic committees on campus. That is a really large part of our engagement. So the way that we got here was when we moved into the new building, our dean made it very clear to us, she was new on the campus at the time, and she made us clear that she wanted the library to be an intellectual and cultural hub of the campus. So since then, that's what we've been trying to do. So her leadership on this has been absolutely instrumental. The next step would be engaging the librarians, taking people and saying having group discussions on what we can do to continue our engagement with campus and the things that we could individually do in our own library departments. And of course, an important part of that is the funding aspect. One of the things that she established in the new building was an outreach librarian. The outreach librarian is absolutely instrumental in all the things that we're talking about today, so that was really an important step. Additionally, we worked on making sure that in our promotion plans and other things that people were recognized and rewarded for their engagement. So we have both incentives for presenting and for outreach and other activities. So that's an important part of our promotion plans, so that we make sure that we recognize the librarians for what they're doing. And that extends to our staff as well, trying to make sure that the non-librarian staff are also engaged in events on our campus, because a lot of them have connections that we don't have. They may be alumni, they may have other activities that they're engaged in on campus. This is one of our library staff members who developed a program for service staff on kind of computer literacy on campus, and it was a really, really big success. And again, it was not something that would have been traditionally thought of as a library activity. We certainly try and engage outside the library walls with our consortia partners, with SCELC and other outside organizations. We've developed lots of different programs that have been successful with SCELC. We have our Vendor Day event at the LMU campus. So that again allows librarians from all over California to come and visit our campus to see what SCELC has to offer. And lastly, I want to focus on one particular program that has been a really big success. We have engaged in a core curriculum development process at LMU for a new core, and we, again, because we've participated in so much of the campus governance, we've put the core curriculum, we have a library, embedded component from the library, information literacy component in all the levels of the new core curriculum. So our students are being engaged in information literacy as 10% of their grade in their first semester and their second semester, as well as in their upper division courses. And a lot of that is built upon participating in campus governance, being at the table when these kind of things are discussed. It's been absolutely instrumental in transforming how our information literacy program, and it builds on all the other engagement we've been involved in. So what we found is that we need to be strategic in choosing what we want to look at as potential partnerships and building upon those. We are always persistent and always at the table when these discussions happen, because that's the only way that we have found. It's very easy for people to forget and just say, put the library off to the side. So really, that issues of partnership and engagement have really gotten us to where we are. So that's what I have. Over to Franny.
Thanks, Glenn. So, I've got a few things that I wanted to touch on and probably categorize them into two main messages for today. And one is, first I wanted to share the story of the birth of SIPX. I'm going to back off a little here. Because I think it's important in understanding how it was created. And it was created as a research project at Stanford that involved very deeply input, feedback, working with the libraries, having them guide us through understanding what their pain points were as well, and having that become part of the technology that developed out of it. I also want to dive a little bit deeper into what libraries can do with the tools that they bring into their campus. It's not just about content access, it's not just about collections management, but there's a lot of data that's running through these systems that can be drawn together and puts the library in a leadership role in being able to help with policy development and curriculum development and course development as well. So what we're trying to take a look at is, be proactive. I think a lot of the themes that you'll hear from all three of our presentations are going to parallel each other. Definitely being proactive is a huge step in this, not just sitting back, being at the table. Making sure you consider using technology, right? How do you embed yourself, working with pilot groups, with new services coming out from different vendors? How do you put yourself in that interface design in a way that's still usable for the user, but clearly communicates the value of the library forward? Making sure that you're there to, at the end of the day, we're all here to try to create a better educational experience, a more efficient educational experience. And there are a ton of tools being used. Every school is different. Every platform combination at every school is different. But the combination of everything is what needs to go forward and be that seamless user experience that they're all accustomed to now. A student wants an Amazon, Google type experience. They don't want to hop from platform to platform to platform. So how do we connect all those pieces in for them together and have them know that this work is being done for them by the libraries? I'll move forward here. I think we're a pretty new company, so some people might not be familiar with what SIPX is. We are a technology system, an end-to-end solution that brings the opportunity for professors to come in, select course materials for their courses, and draws from a variety of different sources. So it could be library licensed material, it could be open access publishers, it could be the Hoffe Trust, it could be materials for which there are copyright permissions that are necessary, and the technology connects into different databases to be able to pull this and communicate this in real time. So it creates a link, and that link is what can network all of these different silos together And that link can be put into a number of different types of platforms. So it could be a learning management system or a MOOC or a website, just something that's flexible enough to be able to understand that professors these days are putting their course materials out in all sorts of different formats. And when we started at Stanford, we were a research group. We were half computer science, and I came from the law side of this, so I was a copyright lawyer by background and a researcher at Stanford. Our group itself was professors, researchers, students, and we ourselves, doing this kind of research, doing this kind of work, we're already feeling constraints of what we could get content access to and the difficulties of the copyright maze, as we call it. So one of the first things we noticed was a lot of the times in the course material setting, the bookstores don't understand what the library's already subscribed to. So that kind of siloed critical data was not connecting, and what that resulted in is students going into a bookstore and paying again for materials that the libraries had already bought subscriptions to. So to be able to solve that problem, we went to the libraries, and they were quite eager to work with us on this. I think it's an area that's a huge pain point for them. They worked with us by showing us their workflows. They worked with us by introducing us to the technological tools they used. They worked with us by having us look at subscription licenses, and as a computer science and law prototype research project, seeing what we could build out of that to try to automate some of the very manual, costly, prohibitive steps that were keeping this data from being connected. And it's, they were hands-on in terms of making feedback suggestions. We would meet with them at least once a month, and we would show them our progress, and they would make suggestions about what our interface should look like. Well, could you put a logo here for the Stanford University libraries? Could you make it a little bit clearer, what the student is allowed to do with this piece and what they aren't allowed to do with this piece? How do we make sure that they understand that, the free stuff is all at the top, and the professor can select from free before they go down to paid content? So it was in that engagement with the library that we really started to focus on, what is the pain point here? And having an even deeper knowledge of what was actually going on the ecosystem of a higher education setting. Because we only understood our little piece of that puzzle. We didn't understand the whole picture. So I've talked myself out of my maze slide. So at the end of the day, when you look at what the system does, it takes that reading link and it allows faculty to be able to push it back into wherever they need to. But what you're seeing on the slide over here is the Sakai learning management system at Stanford that's used for predominantly all of the courses. The students come in, and when they click the links to get to the reading that they need to do for class that week, they'll see a little message come up. So this is copyright education for the libraries to push forward to the community. The students now see that their price is $0, but the list price of this piece is $2 or $3 or whatever the public list price is. They also see why it's $0, right? So now they have a little piece of the picture that content costs money sometimes. They also know that their cost was covered by the school because the library bought them a subscription. And this is where Stanford had asked to put a logo in for themselves as well. So every school now that we sign up with has that logo come into play. And again, we worked with them. We learned so much from them, from being able to create something that's really streamlined, flows within the actual workflow of a professor and a student, and is clean and communicates just what it is that the libraries need to send forward and the students need to know and the professors need to know. People have taken this and put it into the MOOCs as well. So I'm touching on this because I think it's important to not just look at this end of the picture, but I'll change gears in a second and talk about the data that flows through these systems and what the libraries can do with it in order to create more benefit and more value, more visibility within their higher level policy development community as well. So in understanding usage, in understanding what your actual students and professors are doing on campus, there are the obvious benefits that are internal to the library. Your collections development becomes much cleaner and much smarter when you have data-driven analysis. Some of the things that we're really trying to work on, though, is there's a next step in this picture. What we can do with this is to tell professors now what readings the students really engaged with and what readings weren't touched. And as a library, you're in a position where you can see the content analytics coming through from one vendor. You can see the course statistics coming through from another platform, whether it be your learning management system or your registrars. And you're in a place where you can bring all of the puzzle pieces together and push that forward to people who can either change how they create a course or how they teach a course, or in the case of online education, can really think about the assets they're created and how best to apply those assets. So it gives, and a little bit of this is future speculative looking, but it gives the school the opportunity to really have a great picture based on data about what they can do with all of this money that's being spent on MOOCs and online learning and online degree granting. We've seen just enormous movement, not just from the school community, but now it's also a librarian taking that data and going to a publisher and saying, hey, there are certain price points that seem to be working well. There are certain price points that don't seem to be working well. And being able to take all of that data in and have more efficient market pricing. So we've seen in some of the MOOCs that the readings, so say there's 10 readings in a particular course, some of those readings do very well at $2, $3 levels, and some of those readings don't get any uptake at $15, $20, $25 levels. So being able to be that bridge to bring all of those different players together is something that SIPX tries to do, and I think more broadly librarians can try to do as well. So I don't want to take up too much of my co-speaker's time. I think I've talked myself through these. I think part of this is being able to experiment. And being able to experiment with new technologies is very important. So some of the things that we've seen already in the online course setting has been publishers experimenting with unbundling, with different kinds of price points, taking the data that's coming through and changing their business models. We see the schools also seeing whether or not they get higher student retention rates in certain MOOCs by having different motivation mechanisms. And by motivation mechanism, I mean our last Coursera course had the professor take his course notes and self-publish those as a PDF, and seeing whether or not, by giving the students something that they can keep as a legacy product, that's really going to engage them more than a student who's traditionally in a MOOC setting as a voluntary learner that has put no skin in the game. So having different kinds of techniques there, testing them out, I really do think that this is something that the libraries can get involved in as well, once they have the tools and they know what the data is, to be able to play around with different kinds of future experiments. So I'll leave it here and pass the baton over to Matt.
So I'm going to try to pull some things together, but I like to simplify things. So in my mind, I was going to talk about 3 R's: the changing role, changing relationship, and changing requirements for us librarians, and then touch briefly on some of the things the OCLC Cooperative is doing to partner with member libraries and other libraries as we move forward into this new world that we live in. Left one? Does it matter? Thank you, sir. So this is how I remember the library from when I was in university. This very warm place you went, it was this solitude. It was just this very, I don't know, you loved going there. That was for me, and I spent many, many, many hours in the library because we did not have any type of electronic resources when I was in school. And the fact was, it was this place where we sat in solitude, and many of our libraries looked like this. They might not have been this grand, but where we sat in solitude and we studied. And so as I was thinking about the changing role of the library, there were really 2 things of many things I could have brought up. I mean, one was obviously the changing place, the library as place. And then the other thing was the change in the library as repository, because we were the repository. That's why we went to the library. It had this incredible monopoly on information and knowledge, and so that's why we had to go there. But we see that what's happened isn't in place. This happens to be University of Alabama, Birmingham. I happened to visit there not long after they reopened, after redoing everything. And I thought, wow, certainly wasn't the way my library was when I was in school. And so it has changed so dramatically. And also the need for these collaborative spaces. Instead of, these long, long rows of reading tables with everyone sitting all by themselves doing their thing, you have these collaborative spaces where students want to come and work together. And then, of course, the computer spaces. When I was in the Addleston Library yesterday for one of the sessions, how many of you have been down there to that library for a session? When you walk into that first floor, I mean, it was astounding the number of workstations they had there. I was just amazed, at that many. But that's what the library has moved to. And of course, we have to have our Starbucks. Because if we don't have our Starbucks, no one would ever come to the library. But the fact that we've changed our place in what it's a collaborative space now. It's no longer this solitude space for individual research, and it's no longer a physical repository that has to come to. Rather, we are information providers, which means that our relationship with our users is changing dramatically, because our user is out there, wherever they happen to be. We all know this. This is not news to any of you, and I'm not likely to say anything shocking, but rather to set some context to remind us of the environment that we live in, and then be able to look at a little bit of what cooperatives are doing to help in that. So this student's sitting here, and she has a question to ask, and she's wanting to know something. Well, the library has the information that she needs, but as we know all too well, that's not where she starts, because we are no longer the starting place. I really don't have to debate that point. There's been way too much research on it in the last 5 years that we all know. We are not the starting place because of the fact that the student, so we do become invisible. I mean, presto, we kind of disappeared out of the picture. Or at best, we are just one among many options for that student where they want to go and find their information. So our relationship has dramatically changed with that student and how we are going to have to engage them. So when we think about what are the requirements for change for us? Yes, we know that we're now in a world where we have to prove our value. We have to show we're contributing to student retention, student graduation, for research institutions attracting funding. We know that we have to continue to change our place, and it's just been amazing to watch that over the last 10 years. I'm fortunate that I get to visit many libraries around the world, actually, and to see how they are changing in their place. We're making this move from, just in case to just in time. All of these things we're having to do. But central to it for me, and it's been a lot of what my life's work's been about for the last probably 12 years, is really understanding our users and figuring out how we get where our users are. Because if we're not their starting point, how do we interject ourselves into their workflow, into their way of seeking information and knowledge, knowing that they're not likely to come to us as their first choice? Because traditionally, we had this role of selecting, acquiring, describing, preserving. But now, increasingly, our role is about exposing our collections, our resources to the user, because they're not coming to us. So we've got to find ways to go to them if we're going to be successful in engaging them. And that's why I think both of the talks prior to mine were so interesting on how we're doing that, how we're using both innovative ideas and what our librarian work is, but also technology to make these things happen. And it really is both, isn't it? We all know technology in and of itself is not an answer, but when we start combining these things with creative people and ideas, that's when it happens. So just quickly, how OCLC is working with member libraries and really beyond member libraries. And of the many things I could have mentioned here, there's only 3 that I'm going to touch on because they are somewhat relevant to the points of changing place, relationship, and the requirements we face in that. One of the things we definitely are helping in is helping libraries in figuring out how they're going to manage down their print collections, because this is something that's becoming a requirement. If I'm going to replace, half of my stacks with computers and another third of them with lounge chairs, I've got to do something with that physical collection. And then understanding our constituencies, and finally, libraries that aren't on the web, but libraries are of the web. We are a key player in that space and are recognized as that. So the first thing when I talk about managing down, this is just one example of many things we've done. Have any of you read the Mega Regions report? It's quite interesting. If you haven't, I think it's worth the read personally. But it's 3 of our research scientists. One of the really cool things about working at OCLC is as a cooperative, we are able to engage some 20 research scientists on our staff, that this is what they are doing on behalf of libraries every day of their life. And so what they did, they've done a couple studies. They did the cloud sourcing report, and then they just did the Mega Regions report, and looked at various models of how we are going to manage down our print collections and turn them into shared print collections, either physically or virtually. And they did it, quite interestingly, based on economic mega regions from other studies outside of librarianship. And they took those and then looked at those mega regions and the size of collections in mega regions to start looking at how might a mega region start thinking about how they would cooperatively manage what Lorcan Dempsey always calls the collective collection of libraries. So again, I'm not here to talk about that report. I just wanted to use it as an example of many of the research papers that are being done and helping libraries think about where we're having to change our place and what it means to be a library's place. How are we going to manage those collections? Of course, another area we do a huge amount of effort is in research of constituencies. This particular example happens to be librarian constituency, what are the top priorities? But if you don't take advantage of the various reports, because a huge amount of research and effort goes into these are not lightly created. And it's that advantage of as a cooperative, we can do these things as a whole membership group on behalf of libraries. And those things are interesting and they're very important. But the last thing is what I really want to focus on, because when we talk about being where our users are, I think we are gaining an understanding of our constituency. I think we're all getting the fact they don't start with us. They have their own workflows they're developing. It's fascinating. Andrew Pace, one of my colleagues, his 12-year-old son starts all of his school research on YouTube. That's where he starts his school research, YouTube. And if there's not something on YouTube about pelicans, then there must not be anything written about pelicans, I guess. I don't know. But it's changing so dramatically. So the role that a cooperative, any type of cooperative, can play is by libraries, registering what they have cooperatively, but then also working with other major content partners, then we're able to have a true aggregation of the collections of libraries, whether they are physical, whether they are licensed or open access, or whether they are digital objects in repositories. We're able to aggregate all of that in a way that then becomes meaningful and useful for what we call syndication, putting that data back out for reuse by both library service partners, but also by consumer service partners. So of course, the first role in that, and so what happens is then, we're able, by using linked data, and I'm throwing a lot out rapidly, sorry, but by using linked data then, to start using the linked data concepts, because Mike Tietz, our VP of the Innovation Lab, and I just recently published an article in Future Internet on the role of libraries in big data. And we started right out saying library data in big data, because sorry, it's not. It's not big data. However, it has a role to play in that world because of the fact that we have authoritative entities of linked data that can be reused. And so that's one of the things, not just OCLC, but others are working. That's what BibFrame's about. So we're able to make that data interesting. So when we can take data from major content partners all over the world and aggregate that. And then when we can work with library service partners, whether they are other discovery services, whether they are other resource sharing interlibrary loan type systems. It was interesting when we came out with article exchange, which lets you just drop an article in a Dropbox type application. Then the scanning companies came to us and said, hey, we want to just have it so the librarian can scan it and it goes straight to article exchange. With other people helping libraries do research on collection development, collection management. With companies like Alibris just using our APIs and our data to help libraries know what they don't have that Alibris is offering to help them do more streamlined collection development. So these are the types of things when you have this massively aggregated data and services built upon it that we as a cooperative are able to do on behalf of the membership. To me, one of the more kind of exciting parts of it is that we can really go out into the consumer services. Whether on the right-hand side of the screen, they're the institutional consumer services, whether it's your learning management system or whatever it is, that we can now expose your data into those services through our APIs, through our web services, and then on the left, of course, through your personal consumer services. And that's actually where it's astounding the traffic that comes to us from Google and Goodreads and Wikipedia that ends up in about 1 million times a month. Someone's on the open web and they end up in a library somewhere because we were used as the switch. See, we're not really meant to be a hub. We're not where you go and hang out. We're a switch, like when you do a Google search. It's a switch. You click on something and now you go there. That's our role in this as the cooperative, is to drive them into you from these, whether personal consumer services or institution consumer services. So that was really fast, even though I still managed to go over time. But I believe, Rick, we do have some time for some questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a microphone right here in the aisle, so. Oh yeah, we didn't put a question slide, but this is, the virtual question slide is up there. So come up to the mic and ask questions, please. Surely there's one question. Does anybody have any commentary about how you've successfully made your library less invisible? Or you've already succeeded and you don't want to tell us? Come on, don't be shy. Yeah.
Yeah, traditionally,
Yeah, just say who you are and where you're from.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm Vera Lamine. I'm from Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia.
Thanks.
And traditionally, it seems that, the public face of a library was usually the reference librarian or your instruction librarian, because they would come in close contact with the students. What role do you see? I mean, you've made mention of metadata, and a lot of mention was made of license cost data that the library collects, and now you're making that very visible. But for smaller institutions where the public face of the library is usually the reference instructional librarian, do you have any suggestions on how the technical services departments of those smaller libraries at smaller universities can kind of compete with the traditional public face of the libraries?
Sure. So what we see is the behaviors of the students and the professors span more than just the libraries these days. Like a learning management system, course materials going into a learning management system, those kinds of activities span through IT, they span through general counsel's office, they span through the libraries. And when we talk about trying to solve that problem and make that end experience the easiest, smoothest flow it possibly can be, you're talking about having to coordinate between multiple departments. So I think part of the visibility in this, like the role of IT, whether you're within the libraries or external to the libraries, is to be proactive in engaging in the different tools that are being built or purchased by making sure that your voice is heard that you're putting in requests, that it's not always just, and you know, I shoot myself in the foot by saying this, but we're at an early stage with our product where we feel we're still maturing, and we don't want everything to be out of the box. We don't want to dictate to users how they're supposed to be using this product, because we're in an online learning age where everything is changing by the minute. So what we are trying to do is create a lowest common denominator tool, and to have the schools, whether it be IT or libraries or general counsel, tell us how they want to be using this. And they should be out, you know, talking to their faculty as well and asking them how they want to be using this.
Yes.
I'm Jack Montgomery from Western Kentucky University. We have had for the last decade a public marketing program, and that's the only way to really describe it as a marketing program, to insert ourselves not only into the university community, and this includes the tech services people too, but the whole community as a whole, because at one time we were isolated. We were even cut off essentially from our public library, and we have worked steadily for over a decade now doing everything you're talking about. We've had concert series that received independent funding. We have 2 lecture series that appear in the community. They've been operating for almost a decade. We have major involvement in a major book fair that comes to town. Now I think we're amongst the largest in our region. It takes an overall commitment, and this didn't come easy, because a lot of perhaps more traditionally focused librarians did not see this as their role. We opened a coffee shop. That was the beginning of it. And we started a weekly concert series, which I took over because I'm involved in the entertainment community of the area. We wrote in the articles in the paper. We've done, it's just a major marketing effort. It has succeeded. We also insert ourselves into just about every part of university life, so that now people are coming to us automatically and saying, okay, we want to load apps onto a, here's X amount of dollars, here are the tablets, you know, what can you do? That brings it in. We're now involved in the e-textbook discussions. But if we had not gotten out that visibility, it would have never happened. And it really isn't a matter of whether you're public services or tech services. A lot of the public services folks are not really focused on delivering any more than reference service. But you have to develop a core of people, almost a marketing team. We also hired a professional marketing individual who has a knowledge of libraries but is not a librarian. We run on a lot of she runs a lot of the mechanical aspects of how we market our institution, and has been very, very successful. We rebuilt our relationship with the public library, which is now good. I mean, it's a tremendous commitment, but it has to have support from the very top at all times. Thank you.
Any comments there? No? Okay. Well, we can take another question,
Okay,
even
so,
though
well,
we're out of time.
I did have a question for Franny, but maybe you can talk to you afterwards, because I'm still not sure how SIPX makes the library more visible. We did have one of your sales reps come to our library to explain it, and as I understood it, and I'm not sure I do understand SIPX as well as I should, but it sounded like it's a content management and delivery platform where our faculty would simply be able to more easily choose content from the library's holdings and then turn that into course packs or content that is in the learning management system. So I don't think I got from your talk how that makes the library more visible.
Sure, and I was focusing on the talk in trying to talk about how the library had helped us create this. But the backbone of the system itself is when faculty or course reserves comes in, it is a bigger picture than just what the library looks at, right? We do want to support academic independence. We also want to lower the cost of the end course material result to the student. So we're looking at library licensed sources as well as open content sources. We have open access publishers, we connect to the Hoffi Trust, and where the faculty is selecting something to be used in that course that requires copyright permissions payment, it creates the databases we draw from, make it very visible and transparent to the professor in real time. This is how much it costs. Make a decision about whether or not you think that's fair to charge to the student. It makes those links, it makes the reading links list. Those reading links can be embedded into whatever form these students are used to receiving their course materials in, or however the professor feels is going to be most effective to communicate those readings to their student. And then from then on, the students come in, they click the link, and we understand the context of each student. So in the broadest sense, we have a system that can take a MOOC course of 50,000 students, 140 countries coming in, dozens and dozens of different universities, and understand that each of these students is a little bit different. So we understand their school affiliation. We apply all of the possible discounts that are applicable to that student based on that affiliation, communicate to them where this discount comes from. Maybe it's like a 50%. Some of our publishers say developing nations get 50% discounts. Sometimes it's the libraries that have that licensed subscription. And we tell the student, you're getting this for free because your school bought it for you. And then it's just an easy delivery of a reading out. So
Right.
that's the...
Yeah, what I would add to what Franny said is SCELC is the largest concentration of SIPX customers so far, and the selling point that I made to our libraries was that one of those last points that Franny made, that when you use a system, you can brand that the library is the provider of the content. And that's really important because of my Caltech story, to take it back to the beginning. If people aren't aware, then you're not going to achieve your goal, which is that they value your services. I mean, because they clearly, in the case of the Caltech professor, not to pick on Caltech, they have a great library, and they have great library staff, and they have a great journal collection, and those professors depended on those journals for their research. So it was a much more self-evident situation back in the days of print, but we know that's gone. So that's why a tool like SIPX, I thought, it's kind of one of these new game-changing technologies that kind of helps shift that, because we used to have library web portals, and we used to sit at Charleston and talk about portals ad nauseum, but the fact is everybody goes to Google, so now how else do you get their attention? So
I think it's a powerful message to be able to say back to your school community, hey, we saved you all of this money. We saved you all of this time. We're helping solve some of those problems for you. So when it comes to marketing, it's about the effort, but it's also about the message.
great. Well, thank you all very much.